copy that allowed Bill Bonner to do what it was that he did, which is to go to companies, write their front-end promotions, and split the front-end revenue. Like, no one else does that. So that style of copywriting just continued as Agora grew, and it was other things that happened that made Agora grow, but it was that style of copywriting that was always one and the same. Now, why is that style of copywriting special? Did you go over these already?
That's next session.
That's next session, okay. So there are 6 leads that you're going to be going over in here, and 3 of them are indirect, right? 3 of them are ways of starting out the sales conversation without me screaming at you, I'm about to sell you something, right? So in general, me not being a copywriter, having written copy sometimes, but not really a copywriter, I generally will not rely on my copywriting skills. I'll generally rely on my marketing skills, which means that any belief that I want to change, that I feel you need to have in order to buy the thing that I want to sell you, I want to shift those beliefs way before we even get into a sales conversation, okay? Because it's easier for me to change a belief when you don't feel like I'm going to try and sell you something than if you feel like I have a hidden agenda of selling you something. So in the way I did it, like when I first started out, was that I would write reports, free reports, and those free reports would be all about like what was currently going on in the world for the most part, and what was therefore going on for the prospect in particular, but it started with the world. And the whole purpose of these reports were to shift beliefs, to get the prospect to see the world the way I saw the world, because that way of seeing things would then lead to what I thought were good products, and hence I'd be able to sell them. But for me, like in that model, like marketing changed the beliefs, and then we got to the sales conversation, and the sales conversation wasn't hidden in any way, stretch, or in any way. The headline itself was some big, bold promise that was basically tied to some kind of offer. Like, so it was very clear right from the get-go, I'm about to try and sell you something. But hopefully my marketing had already changed the belief, so like I was an invited guest, right, because we were talking about the same thing. What Agora's done, one of the things that I think probably better than anyone else is that with these indirect leads, these 3 types of leads that you'll learn all about, has been to disguise the sales conversation. So it's not entirely clear at the very beginning that this is a letter that is going to try and sell me. Now, there have been times in Agora's history where, well, there have been times in direct response, which all of this is kind of a function of, in direct response history where there have been breakthroughs. Every breakthrough that I've ever seen or know about, because I know about more than what I've seen just because I'm only 46 and direct response has been around for like 200 years, but has been a breakthrough in the format of the sales message. So Agora was, there was something, before every sales message, if you were going to do direct mail, came in a letter. And that was it, right? That was it, just the letter. At some point, someone had the wise idea of let's try and make it look like a magazine. And then that was called a magalog. And when those were first introduced, response rates went up 300%, and copywriters got very rich. Then over time, people recognized them for what they were, disguised sales letters. So that didn't work as much anymore. And so then there were like fake FedEx envelopes, and maybe someone who has seen those, like, you know, special delivery mail, it says, like, in a FedEx kind of tone. So that worked for a while, and that died. Then bookalogs, where we actually create the sales message in a mini book, was another way, right? When we first got online, there were unique ways, whether it was, you know, making the sales page look like an editorial, to then looking like a sales letter, then the VSL. And a VSL, the video sales letter, was basically just copy on a PowerPoint where someone was reading it aloud and kind of going through it, right? But if you kind of can understand what that is, it's also a way of taking control of the sales conversation, because they can't scroll to the end to find out the price. So if you kind of can imagine an indirect way of opening the sale combined with a way that disguises that there's even a sale being attempted, like, becomes a very great way to open up a sales conversation. And that's kind of what this whole big idea is all about. Because if you can share with someone a very exciting idea right out of the gate, you avoid having to make a big promise right in the, like, of what's going to occur in the next 3 pages of the sales letter, right? Because if you're not gonna, you either hook someone by an interesting idea, or you hook them by some self-benefit promise. Like, in the next 5 pages, you're going to discover, but as soon as I say the next 5 pages, you're gonna start to discover, soon discover or realize it, you're gonna know. I've already tipped my hand. I'm already trying to sell you in a way, right? Whereas if I just ask you about this, like, did you notice what whatever quarterback said last night as he thought he was going to lose the game last night, what he said, like, that doesn't have any inherent, like, in it, that, like, that idea has nothing in it that means it's going to lead to a sale. And because of that, we can start a conversation that can lead to a sale without your resistance being up. So it's kind of like, I've been in a lot of different businesses before I got online. And one of the businesses I was in, I opened up a hypnosis center. I got hypnotized, and I was so blown away with it. I decided to study hypnosis, and then I opened up a hypnosis center, and I grew into a chain of hypnosis centers. And so I had like 60 full-time hypnotists working for me in Manhattan, and had a bunch of hypnosis centers going on doing hypnosis. And in one of the things that, I was never a great hypnotist, but I had to learn it in the beginning to start the company. One of the things that makes hypnosis work is that you get people into a very relaxed state of mind, you get them into kind of a trance kind of state of mind, kind of zoned out a little bit. And one of the things that a hypnotist is trying to do is get you into a relaxed enough place where there's something called critical factor bypass. And what critical factor bypass is all about is whether or not you're critically analyzing what's being said, and whether or not you're determining each sentence by sentence, is this true or not? So if someone's in a sales situation, in general, you are not allowing for critical factor bypass. You're analyzing everything that's being said. The car salesman says that, like, this is a good deal. You don't say, oh, okay, it must be a good deal. If he's telling it to me, you have some resistance to that idea because you're critically analyzing every sentence that's going down, right? Whereas if you're here, right, and Ryan's teaching you, it would be a place where it would be unwise to critically analyze every sentence to determine whether he's telling you the truth or not. You just accept it because for the task at hand, to get the outcome that you want, critically analyzing doesn't help you, right? So part of what an interesting or an unarresting idea can do is allows for critical factor bypass. It gets you so engaged, so much paying attention, that you stop kind of thinking about, well, any good story does, right? Like any good story you get sucked into, you stop analyzing, could this be true, would this be true, how true does this sound, to just being told the story, right? And as you're being told the story, you get sucked in. And it's the same thing with a great idea. What I think, where you're going to find probably the most ideas is with more input, personally. And then that's input that is interesting ideas that you find interesting, that you can kind of throttle over. So for me, as I just recently have begun taking my company inside of Agora, so now we're all of a sudden looking for interesting ideas, right? And so what I've been doing is going to the places where I found interesting ideas before. So some of the places where I find interesting ideas is futurists. That's one place that I like to look, right? So I will go on to YouTube and I'll type in futurists and start watching presentation after presentation. Because in general, futurists kind of sometimes share some ideas that I find personally exciting, and I know that can be straddled into being exciting for other people, right? Some different newspapers, more so than others, right? Some magazines, maybe like Discovery, or there's a D, I forget the
Discover?
Yeah, like Discover, like strange places that are out of the mainstream but who kind of tell interesting stories and therefore have interesting ideas. It is so much, I've done both for my business. I've had to kind of come up with good, big ideas at times. I find that my best ideas have always been found, they have not been generated. So I'll tell you like a couple quick stories about that. So my very first, what kind of put me on the map, so to speak, was I wrote a free report. And in this free report, I had this deal with Agora that was happening like 3 months down the road. I had just finished my coaching program that I had Finish it. And so I had this 3-month window, and I didn't like the idea of not making money for 3 months, so I decided I would write this report with the intention to help people see growing a business online the way I saw it, which at the time nobody saw it the way I saw it, which is why nobody really saw the need for business coaching. So I wrote this report of like the experiences I had, that if people read it and kind of saw what I saw, maybe they would think what I think, and that was that they needed business coaching. So I released that report, and that report went viral, and instead of getting like 10 new clients, I got thousands, and that was the beginning of my business. The big idea behind that, right, came from just listening to an interview. And I was listening to this interview, and who the interview was, I still remember, but it's not important for this. And the person doing the interviewing made a distinction between strategy and tactics, right? The person being interviewed said that was really the wrong distinction. That, in fact, if we're going to talk about entrepreneurs, the real distinction is not between strategy and tactics, it's between strategy and being opportunistic. Like, are you following some long-term strategy to get the outcome you want, or are you quickly just seizing upon whatever's around to try and get what you want, being opportunistic? And for whatever reason, because like I was reading a lot, because maybe I was thinking a lot at that moment about how to talk to people about business, that distinction, like, between strategy and opportunism was it. So he just said it as like a throwaway thing, but I grabbed it, and that idea made me tens of millions of dollars over my career, just that one difference, because other people had never thought about that difference between opportunism and strategy. This guy did, who I heard, and I'm very appreciative of him giving me that distinction, but that was a big idea that like no one saw, and maybe it was the right time for that idea to be introduced into the market, but it was really just me listening